Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us here on the Japan 2020 Digital Show for March 2021. I'm Will DuPree here at KXAN in Austin, Texas.
And I'm Andrew Marden, coming to you from KSEE TV in Fresno, California. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Will.
Yes, very nice to see you, Andrew. So bright and early out there in California. And I will say that we are in March. It's very hard to believe that at this point. And it's also important to note that this is just the same month, a year ago, that the decision was made to postpone the Tokyo Olympic Games. And now, Andrew, get this, we are just 142 days away from the opening ceremonies, and still so many questions remain out there.
Yeah, the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, is if fans will be allowed to attend. And we really should circle March 25th, and I'll get to that in just a second. But yeah, here's something we need to talk about, Will. It's being reported that the International Olympic Committee and Japanese organizers are going to meet this week to decide if fans are allowed to attend events and cheer on the athletes. Now, I mentioned March 25th. That's the date we really need to focus on our calendars, because that is when Japanese outlet Kyodo News is reporting a decision is expected on whether or not to let fans in from other countries. It is worth pointing out, March 7th, Sunday, this Sunday, is when the state of emergency in Japan is expected to end in Tokyo. It's already been lifted in some other areas outside the region. Now, if there are no fans, though, due to the ongoing global pandemic, that may make the Tokyo Games an event that is strictly made for television. These Olympics, as we know, have already been through so much, Will, including a change in leadership in a very high-profile position.
Yeah, that is true. A scandal last month took out the president of the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee less than 5 months before the start of the Games. Yoshiro Mori resigned from that position after the 83-year-old made sexist comments saying women, quote, talk too much. He initially refused to step down from his position, but pressure mounted from sponsors and an online petition that drew 150,000 signatures. A 22-year-old Japanese college student named Momoko Nojo launched that petition and drove the hashtag Don't Be Silent campaign with other activists on social media in response to Mori's comments. Organizers have now named his replacement a woman who's a politician and a 7-time Olympian herself. Seiko Hashimoto won bronze in speed skating in the 1992 Winter Olympics and also competed in cycling at the Summer Games. Hashimoto previously served as the government's Olympic minister, so she's already been closely involved with the planning. Since taking over this new post, she already promised to add more women to the executive board.
Yeah, Hashimoto reportedly told Japanese media that she felt the Olympics and the Paralympics should take place in front of crowds. And we have a quote that she gave to a newspaper in Japan saying this: "When we think about the possibility of holding the Olympics without fans in the stands, athletes will wonder why there are not fans just for the Olympics and Paralympics when other competitions are allowing in spectators." And last month, Will, you and I spoke with our very own Jack Doles, who was in Tampa Bay at the Super Bowl, and we know that they had 22,000 fans at the Super Bowl. So it can be done. I know that the Olympics is a global event. The Super Bowl is a worldwide event on television, but mostly Americans were at that game. But they did figure it out.
Yeah, they did, and that was something important to see, at least that large of an event being able to do this. And we are still waiting for a lot more specifics about how the Olympics will hold the event during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, we hope to get some clarity on that soon. There are some more Olympic headlines, of course, that we want to discuss, and this was kind of a shocking story. Here in the U.S., a former Olympic gymnastics coach committed suicide last week. John Geddert. He was charged with 24 felonies, including human trafficking and sexual assault. Now, last Thursday, he was supposed to turn himself into Michigan police, but his body was found at a rest stop. Geddert was long associated with Larry Nassar, the disgraced Olympic team doctor, and Geddert was the head coach of the 2012 U.S. Women's Olympic Gymnastics team, which won a gold medal. The president of USA Gymnastics released a statement to the Associated Press expressing shock that he killed himself and also extended sympathy for the victims.
In other news now, since the Summer Games are still set to happen in Japan this summer, we wanted to share an update about the state of the pandemic there and the vaccination rate that's happening. So Japan has controlled the virus better than some other larger countries. And if you take a look at this comparison, at least to the United States, according to the World Health Organization, Japan reported more than 432,000 cases and almost 8,000 deaths. Meanwhile, the CDC reports the U.S. has had more than 28 million cases and well over 500,000 deaths from the virus. Important to point out as well, there is a population difference. The U.S. is about 3 times as large as Japan, but still those differences in the numbers, Andrew, are pretty startling.
Yeah, I believe Japan has about 125 million people. If I'm, off by a few, I apologize there. But Japan only began administering the virus just 2 weeks ago, which put it several months behind other countries. And here's a stat for you. As of Saturday, only 18,000 doses have been administered thus far. So they are definitely behind everybody else. And Will, you talked with an infectious diseases expert about how all of this could affect the upcoming games.
Yeah, I did. Dr. Stephen Thomas, who is the chair of the Infectious Disease Division at Upstate University Hospital in Syracuse, New York. He's been our resident expert for the past few months talking about the COVID-19 and where it stands in the country and also the vaccination rate. And he really did address about the threats of the coronavirus variants affecting the Olympics. So let's take a listen.
That is the host nation, and it would be nice to have a high level of immunity within the host nation because they're going to be providing all the in-country transportation. It's their airports. It's going to be their staff, doing most of the logistics and maintenance of the games. I'm less concerned about the level of immunity in the host nation and more concerned about, the amount of variance in immunity that you're going to have from all of these athletes coming from all these different countries. If they're going to have these games, they should still proceed with a very conservative plan, similar to how some of the professional sports leagues in the United States proceeded in terms of having these athletes and the people who train them and care for them in bubbles, in quarantine bubbles for 2 weeks before they arrive. They should compete. They should remain in their bubble while they're there, and when they're done competing, they should leave. And we should be happy to allow people to compete and play. And wait for the pomp and circumstance of the games for the next go around.
What is your biggest concern about these coronavirus variants popping up and still this global event where people are going to be all converging from different parts of the world in one place? What's your biggest concern with that now?
It's a combination of things. So one, that we'll have a variant that is highly transmissible, highly lethal, and that can escape the immunity of vaccination or our therapeutic antibody cocktails will no longer work. That would be the doomsday scenario. It's time to be concerned, but it is not time to panic. So, we were just looking at the Janssen data. It demonstrates that it has a pretty good level of efficacy against both, the South African as well as the Brazilian variant. So it's not like it's not efficacious, but it clearly has less efficacy compared to, the Chinese variant, for example. So it's not time to panic, but that would be the most concerning thing to me, is that we get a variant that has all those characteristics. So it really is a race, right? It's a race to get as many safe and efficacious vaccines out there and getting put into arms and people being willing to take them, because the more that you reduce transmission in the population, the less opportunity that these variants have to spread, and the less opportunity there is for new variants to come around, right? We have a new variant in New York now, and we have a new variant in California. So this is just what viruses do. So it really is, it's a race right now.
And Andrew, as you heard right there, he keeps reiterating that phrase, it's a race. I had previously asked him during our interview, it seems like the fight against the virus is happening on two fronts. On one end, it's identifying these kinds of variants that are popping up, and as he said, viruses mutate. On the other hand, it's trying to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible so that they don't get sick and then those variants continue to spread. So it's a very complicated situation. Obviously, it's a top concern for the Olympics. As he mentioned, people from all over the world are going to converge on just one place here in the next few months.
Yeah, it's a race to get to herd immunity. You need 75 to 80% of the population to really, have no symptoms and react positively to the vaccinations. And Dr. Thomas got the vaccine himself, right? Did he say anything about how he's feeling, if there have been any symptoms on his end?
Yeah, he did. He got both doses, so he is fully vaccinated now. And he said that he only had a little bit of pain in one of his arms after that second dose, but it went away after about a day. So the side effects or consequences from getting that full vaccination were pretty mild overall. And we should also point out that he played a role in the vaccine trial for Pfizer. So I also asked him about this information that Pfizer is looking into a third dose of the vaccine as well as a booster shot to deal with some of these variants. And he can only speak in generalities that Pfizer was working on that kind of project, but he didn't have any information to share. So we'll continue to check back with him for sure.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Will, is it can be a bit confusing for people out there because there is a single dose of the vaccine that has been rolled out, but not in mass quantities
That's
yet.
right.
So you've got the first shot, then 3 weeks, then the second shot, possibly a booster shot, and then there is a whole nother COVID-19 vaccine that's out there that is just the one-shot deal. So just stay educated if as best you can, but we're all hoping, of course, that the herd immunity will take effect pretty soon.
That's for sure. Well, Andrew, just to turn another page this morning, we have a guest who's going to be joining us here shortly.
That's right. Yeah, we talk a lot about athletes and preparing for, the upcoming games. And we like to think that we know some athletes, and we do. But this gentleman talks to them on a weekly basis. We'd like to welcome in now Ryan Burrow of WGN Radio. He has a Quest for Gold podcast. Ryan, welcome to the Japan 2020 live stream. And let's start with this. You recently posted episode 43. That was just a few days ago. It was with Robbie Smith, the 2016 Olympian in the sport of wrestling. Let's take us back to the beginning. How did you first get started with this venture, your Quest for Gold podcast?
Yeah, I've actually been doing it for a few years now. I'm based here in Chicago, and there are plenty of athletes here to choose from, whether it be basketball players, whether it be track stars, swimmers. You really have kind of your pick, with a few exceptions of sports. Most of them played pretty heavily here in Chicago and the suburbs. So I just started talking to them and just started meeting with them, and many of them very young athletes, more than willing to talk about their life story, how they got into the sport, their dedication, and that's just kind of continued on through the years, and it's great actually, because I've made some great relationships with them as these years have gone on. I've seen them not only go to the Olympics and excel, but kind of what life has been like after the Olympics, which is always fun to watch as well.
So how do you find them? Do you contact them on social media? Do you go through agents? Do they reach out to you? Like you mentioned, athletes from all types of different sports. How do you find them in order to sit down and interview them?
All of the above. Some of them have agents. Some of them you just try to grab when they're in town. Beach volleyball comes to Chicago. The AVP tour comes here, so you got a chance to grab a few people here and there. There are also a lot of opportunities for people who are training in the Chicago area. And I have to tell you, during this pandemic, it's been great because, all of these athletes are just a Zoom or Skype interview away. So that's been very helpful, especially with a lot of the athletes now who have been shuffled all across the country. I just wrapped up an interview with a sailor who's right now training in the Canary Islands, water polo player who's in Europe as well. So the pandemic's actually been pretty fruitful because I don't have to actually be in person to talk to them anymore.
So when it comes to the Olympics specifically, have you always been a fan? Were you a little kid that was, standing up and cheering and, proudly, just I want to say standing for the national anthem, but I know that could be a touchy subject, these days. But just what's your Olympic background, your experience with, athletes competing for their countries?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I flash back to 96 Atlanta. I was there with my family. I was actually in Centennial Park just a couple hours before the bomb went off there. Was not a witness to it. We were away from the area at that time, but That experience not only got me into the news world, which is what I'm in right now, but also kept me really engaged in the Olympics, and I've followed it every year since. I mean, it's fun to watch the big sports, the golf, the basketball, but you really have to see uphand or up close, firsthand, these athletes who pour their entire life into Olympic sports, whether it be wrestling, whether it be archery, some of these sports that maybe we're not used to as Americans seeing on a daily basis, and really kind of following their journey. And as I've talked to more and more people, the more the interest has continued, throughout all athletes and throughout all sports, really.
Ryan, I have a question for you. I know that you have interviewed a lot of athletes. What are some of the experiences that they're having trying to prepare for the games while also dealing with this uncertainty that the pandemic has brought?
Yeah, one thing that we've been trying to tackle on the podcast is, first of all, what's the health condition been like? Has everyone been able to stay safe? And for the most part, the athletes have been able to. You have to keep in mind, most of them range from teens to 30s, and most of them are in pretty good health. So from that perspective, everyone's been in good shape. One of the stickier issues that's come up during the pandemic has been finances. How do these athletes make money? Do they have sponsorships? If so, are those sponsors still around? Some of these athletes, triathletes, for example, make money by competing in races. And when you've got a year's worth of races that have been shut down, what's the plan? So we've kind of navigated how they've been able to continue to finance themselves, finance their training. Some of these team sports, no problem. Softball, volleyball, basketball, the money's there, the money's going to be there. But for more individual sports, it's been a challenge. And then the third thing we've talked about is just training. How has this impacted training? You've got athletes who have been looking around the country for tracks, for gyms, for courts. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of athletes now who have had to go overseas just to find places to train with their team. And we get a little bit of, we get into a little discussion about how we're handling the coronavirus here in the United States versus maybe how it's being handled in other countries.
Ryan, is the general consensus that the Olympics will take place this summer? Because we've obviously seen some encouraging signs the last few weeks, but we talked to athletes, several months ago that weren't sure. But I assume with just a few months out that they're all optimistic that the games will take place?
For the most part, yes. There's always that 1% feeling in the back of everyone's brain that, am I training for something that's actually going to happen? And that's a big hurdle that these athletes have to face, because the moment you start waking up and thinking Tokyo's not going to happen, my qualifying events aren't going to happen, well, then you've kind of put yourself into a really rough spot as far as the confidence levels and training levels. So, there have been athletes who just are kind of going through the motions right now because they don't know, as we don't know, how this is all going to play out. But for the most part, they've been very optimistic that this is moving forward. They feel good about the playbook that's been put out and some of the health concerns that have been raised and issues. They know that protocols, at least at some of these qualifying events, have been pretty intense, and that's made them feel pretty good. But until that cauldron is lit, you just don't know.
He's Ryan Burrow of WGN Radio, and the podcast is called Quest for Gold. You can find it at WGNradio.com/Quest for Gold. Ryan, thanks so much for the time today, and quick shout out to you. I used your Grant Breckenridge interview for one of our weekly stories that was shared across all of our stations and obviously available on this website. And he was terrific, artistic gymnast who is from your backyard there in the Chicago area, competed at Stanford, and like everybody else, looking for a place to train. So thanks so much for all you do, Ryan, and pleasure talking with you today.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ryan, again. All right, Andrew, very nice to have Ryan. We've been wanting him to join our show for a while now, so it's good to have him here, and I'm sure we'll have him back.
Yeah, I'd love to have him back. It's always nice to get different insights, from not just from athletes, but from broadcasters as well. I mean, if he's somebody that's been following the Olympics, he mentioned since 1996 in Atlanta. 2002 was the last time the Olympics were held in this country, Will, which is crazy when you think that we're already in 2021. But you had the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2002, the Summer Olympics in Atlanta in 1996, and they're not coming back to the U.S. until 2028. And I know I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself because this is the Japan 2020 live stream, but we do have news of upcoming Olympic Games to share with all of you.
Yeah, a lightning round of headlines to go through, so I'll let you kick it off, Andrew.
Sure. We'll start with Russia, which is going to compete under a different name for the next two Olympics. The ROC, which stands for the Russian Olympic Committee, officially rebranded because Russia's name has been banned, as I said, for the next two Olympics due to that doping scandal that we all read about.
And the Eiffel Tower is getting a brand new look ahead of the 2024 Olympics that will be held in Paris. Over the next several years, it's reported that crews will work to strip years of paint and rust off that iconic landmark before applying a new layer of gold paint. Should be beautiful, Andrew.
Yeah, so that's 2024, and then we have an idea of where the 2032 Olympics might take place, Will. How old will you be in 2032? The IOC named the Australian city of Brisbane as its preferred candidate. This decision puts Brisbane on the fast track 11 years before the Games and before other cities and other countries have shared their pitches to the world. And I believe Qatar and Budapest are also rumored to be in the running to host in 2032. But it sounds like the IOC might have Brisbane as its candidate. So mark your calendars for 2032 in the that would be the summer games, right? I'm trying to think because we're in an odd year this year. It's a bit confusing, but yeah, that would be the Summer Olympics of 2032.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be pretty warm there, especially because it's on the coast. But you never know. Maybe they will hold the Winter Olympics and have some special venues there.
There are some countries that have hosted the Olympics before, and obviously it was in Sydney in 2000. Our very own Jack Doles was there. I've never been to Australia, but he just said that it was a phenomenal job by the IOC, by the USOPC, by all parties involved, and it's really neat when you can return to a city, return to a country that has hosted the games before, and we saw that with South Korea. I mean, Pyeongchang was a first-time host city, but the Olympics in Seoul in 1988, went off without a hitch, and so it's really neat to have the world showcase what it has for all of its new inhabitants for the 3.5 week stretch whenever it turns out to be.
Wow. Okay. Well, there is so much still to track because, as we had mentioned, that it's been a year since the postponement decision was announced about the Tokyo Olympics. We are still reporting and tracking this, that the Olympics will be held in July, coming up in just a few months. And Ryan there was saying, Andrew, that he believes, these athletes say that they believe the games will happen. We're still tracking it, and apparently the plans are still forming as we're talking here.
Yeah, we're supposed to get more clarity as we get closer. And again, we mentioned at the top of this live stream broadcast that the decision on fans, or at least the initial decision on fans, is going to come this week, with a more comprehensive decision coming in April or May. I mean, look, in a perfect world, we want everybody to get back to normal. As you mentioned, Will, the entire world pretty much shut down, around this time last year. And so things are going to be a lot different in 2021 for a worldwide event like the Olympics. But if you think about it, this could be, fingers crossed, this could be the reopening of the world if it's done correctly. And the Super Bowl had the blueprints that hopefully the Olympics will be able to follow and just extrapolate to the next level. And we've said this a bunch of times over the last few months. You've got 10 to 12,000 athletes coming from 200 different countries. The last thing you want is for the pandemic to just, start over again. And
Yeah.
so the goal is to do it safely, but also, you don't want all these athletes' trainings to go for naught. And Ryan kind of touched upon that as well.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for watching this month's edition of the Japan 2020 Digital Show. Andrew, me and you will be back in next month on the first Tuesday.
We will. That'll be on April 6th. We hope, of course, that you can all join us then. And by then, we'll also see if the NCAA tournament was able to hold a massive event in one city, because Indianapolis is holding all of the March Madness games this year. And so, based on what happened in Tampa with the Super Bowl, if Indianapolis can also have this tournament go off without a hitch, then that definitely is an encouraging sign for another massive event that will be coming our way in a few months. But yeah, we'll see you again on April 6th. Everyone, thanks so much. Enjoy your month and have a great day.
All right, everybody, take care, be healthy. We'll see you here again.